Hi there, it's Sewa, and welcome to another conversation with a female founder who's created their own unique blueprint for business success. For today's conversation, we meet Dr. Tai, who is a licensed psychologist, and along with the other doctors in her practice, she focuses on the mental health of professional Black women. Over the past year, we have all been through a lot: a pandemic, as a society having to come to terms with social injustice, working remotely from home on top of each other. Some of us are probably also homeschooling our kids remotely. It's been a lot, and it's also taken a mental toll. So if you're looking for some tools and resources that can help you not only cope, but to thrive from a mental health perspective, this is going to be a great conversation for you to listen in on. Before we jump in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. All right, let's jump into it.
Dr. Tai, welcome to She's Off Script. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
So, for anyone who hasn't come across you yet, could you share who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So, I am a licensed psychologist and the founder of the Black Girl Doctor. So, we are a virtual therapy practice, and we specialize in working with and supporting the mental health and wellness of professional Black women specifically. I think about professional Black women as those who are working in corporate America or creatives or entrepreneurs or out there just kind of not chasing, that are securing the bag while also trying to live their best life, which I like to think of as really being excited about the life that you get to wake up and live and experience joy along the way. I think that that is it's a universal struggle, but the way that it shows up in the lives of Black women and it's very different. And so we have a team of Black women doctors who are incredibly amazing that I feel very talented, very fortunate to work with, who specialize in working with this population. And we do therapy, one-on-one therapy, we do couples therapy, and then on the other side, because it's really important that we're not just out here teaching Black folks how to deal with injustice. We do corporate programming, so we work with companies and try to help them make the workspace healthier for Black people.
Ooh, I love that. And as you mentioned, for many Black women, the pursuit of that perfect life for them shows up in different ways. And I would say the struggle to get there also takes a different toll. And for many of us right now, we are living and working in a new paradigm. Co-working spaces have shut down. Some office spaces are going virtual now. And we're working from home while homeschooling. We're doing a lot. So so as a mental health expert who is working a lot with Black women within the professional space, what are some of the common themes you've been seeing come out over the past year?
Yeah, so this past year has been really, really hard. And so
Mhm.
our practice has been virtual since before the pandemic. This is the way we wanted to reach our population, busy women, right? And so it was great that we were set up to capture it. But what we saw was just a huge spike in terms of increase in distress and just sadness. I think overwhelming sadness when you think about like violence against Black bodies and just the attention paid to all of the protests and the way that Black folks are being traumatized. I think the biggest impact back when after the murder of George Floyd was how the media constantly played that video over and over again. And so as a psychologist, we are not supposed to see that. You are not supposed to see murder, right? And of someone that looks like you. And so what's happening, what it is called is vicarious trauma. And it's when you might as well have been there and that been happening to you. So, like you think about the impact of someone that's witnessed to a crime or like a murder scene, like that is a special situation. That person usually gets support. But what happened when the media kind of saturated the market like that, like we just saw our people being vicariously traumatized and having reactions to that, right? And people like having, like nightmares and just pain and sadness, depression, anxiety. And, it's interesting when you think about the people that were already in therapy, just like trying to keep it together. It's hard out here. And then we see people typically you see people get better. And then this happened and we saw a lot of people like kind of decline. And then we did a lot of work with just like, this is really talking about the difference between being unwell and having a healthy reaction to something that is traumatizing. And those are a little bit different. And so when bad things happen, a healthy mind will respond by experiencing pain. And so we did a lot of work with helping folks cope with the pain that they were experiencing. That was actually really healthy for us all to experience.
Mm. I feel like that's something key to hone in on, that it's okay to feel the pain and it's okay to be impacted when something so massive like, social injustice or a pandemic happens. But for a lot of our audience members, they're either running a business on the side while working in corporate America, or they are or they are really new to entrepreneurship. So on both sides of the coin, how would you encourage people within the corporate space who are managers to talk to their people when something so impactful is happening in the social landscape? Because I think we see a lot of joking about, I went back to work and it was as though nothing had happened. No one was really addressing it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's this invisibility, right? It's kind of
Mm.
like, am I living in the Twilight Zone? And I
Right.
think I had a lot of conversations just like, this is actually happening. You are not making this up. Black people are being murdered. We're in a pandemic, and then you're at work and everyone's pretending like everything's normal.
Mhm.
It's not you, right? So I think the acknowledgement is really important. But when you think about managers, I think a lot of what I see happening is that when people don't know what to say, they don't say anything.
Mhm.
And I think that is not a good approach. Right. I think when you don't know what to say, one, get some support, get some consultation to figure out how to say something. But in the interim, what you can always do is comment on your process. And so to be able to say, all of this has happened. I don't really know how to, I'm struggling with finding a way to support the team. I want you to just know that I acknowledge this and I'm figuring something out. Even doing something like that is vastly different from just ignoring it and saying, oh, is that report going to be to me on Monday? No, it isn't. But and what we're seeing is, I think Black women, the community that listens to this podcast, we're used to making miracles happen. And so despite all of this stuff happening, we're still producing, right?
Mhm.
But we're not okay. And I think that what a manager can do is provide some relief to the pressure to constantly perform at the same level. And so it's not enough just to say, I see that everyone must be hurting. I want to acknowledge everyone must be hurting. But then you need to be able to give something, right? So it's not just, oh, yes, let's take a moment and process. Like, so what are we not doing so that I can process?
Mhm. Because now you're putting an extra burden on me on top of producing like I usually produce.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I would say the same sentiment probably still applies to business owners who are managing vendors, business owners who are managing teams. I was recently talking to a client who was talking about how she was, I think, in labor and vendors were still expecting things from her, calls from her. So I think it's important that we are human beings before we are business owners and before we are managers. So I would say within that same vein, when you're having the conversations with your people as a manager and things are not coming across, sometimes I, as the person being managed, can probably help to facilitate. So what are some ways that I, as a team member, can manage up to my business, to my boss, to the owner of the company, to kind of clue them into the fact that, hey, you probably need to change something around here?
Yeah. So I'll acknowledge maybe and talk about them a little bit separately, like saying you're managing up to someone that's your boss that has this kind of there's a power dynamic there, right? Versus when you're a vendor or like you're an entrepreneur and you're providing a service, like it's still someone that you're reporting to because you're providing a service, but it's different. Like you work for yourself, you make these decisions, right? Like this,
Mm.
and so I think on that side, when you're providing a service to someone as the vendor, I think it's really important that you take responsibility to assert your boundaries, right? And then and expect them to fall in line, right? And that may not happen, but that is the boundary that needs to be put up. And so, people email me and my corporate clients email me all times of the night, but that doesn't mean I'm answering.
Mm-hmm.
But it has to be intentional because I see it. And it's not like I don't check my email all times of the night. It is that I'm being intentional and saying, this is my boundary. Like I'm taking time off or I'm taking, I respond in this time where I need space to process or whatever, or I'm having a baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and so that I think can be directly communicated to say, I received your, when it's appropriate time again, right? Like I see
Mm-hmm.
your message, just want to let you know, I'll be unavailable between this time and that time. And you don't have to necessarily going into detail, but just setting hard boundaries. And I think what it does is it sets the tone of the relationship for you and that partner ongoing. And so in the beginning, don't be like so responsive right away, and you constantly take control of it. And I think a lot of the times we respond to things and we have made a lot of assumptions of what we have to do. And it's like, oh, if I don't respond, they're going to fire me. If I don't respond, because we're operating as if that's what's going to happen. You don't actually know, like, are they really? And so if you set the tone from the beginning, I think a lot of us are surprised at what actually happens. And in terms of just like in kind of an organization, I think that I want to just acknowledge the power dynamic and how it's a vulnerable position to be in, to be able to say, hey, I need something, or I need support, or this is not a reasonable request. So acknowledging that. But I do think that you can kind of map it out. And I like to think about it as to just kind of say, hey, I have this on my plate and I'm having a hard time with this. Like, this is something that can we move this out? So just making a suggestion, like, so I have time to process. And so you're making an ask while stating that what they're asking for is ridiculous.
I know. I love the threads that go around, like what is corporate speak for 1, 2, and 3, for example. Like, how do I say you sound crazy right now? But,
Exactly.
and I would say the same applies when you're running a business as well, because you want to appear and be professional in your dealings with your clients and your vendors at the same time. But I like what you said about making it a suggestion and letting people know what you need. But I would say right now, as I mentioned, it is a different time. And I've talked to people who feel like they're having a hard time just shutting down. So when it comes to work hours, for example, what are some tools that we can put in place so that we can bring work to a natural end, even though we're working from home?
Yes. So the pull to just work constantly has grown. I feel like most professional working women were doing this already. But there was a break, and then they were going home and then pulling out their laptops and working some more. But now it's even worse, because then you can work through the commute and you can keep working all night long, and it's all encompassing. And so I really think some strategies that I've seen that have been effective. Well, what I will say, nothing works for everybody. The same thing doesn't work for everybody. And so the goal is to identify strategies. And even if you think it's ridiculous, just try it. And if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't work, try something else. And I think the goal is that you don't give up. I think a lot of times what happens is someone's like, oh, I tried to do that. I tried to meditate and that didn't do anything. So then they just go back to being a workaholic and doing nothing. And it's like, no, you have to keep trying something, and sometimes trying things a couple of times to see if it sticks. But I'll throw a couple things out. So one is to plan for the natural breaks. So I will say, and plan something that you look forward to. So even if it's something like you take a walk at 6 p.m. with your partner, right? And so it's y'all do your 30-minute walk. And so it is a forced movement to like get up and go do something. I think also sometimes when you have something to look forward to, it makes you focus a little bit more in the day. So it isn't that you don't actually have till midnight because, oh, I got till 6 and then I got to do that thing, right? And so you kind of will push it out a little faster, kind of keep you more focused. So planning things. I will also say, so this sounds really strange, but I know people that are doing a fake commute. And so they're like, I will put my laptop in my bag at the end of the day, get up, like go walk around the block and then come back in, take my jacket back off, and then, okay, now I'm home, right? And so it is literally like a mind reset, right?
Mhm.
And so it's funny, it sounds silly, but those kind of things actually trigger your brain like you're in a different part of your day.
Got it. But does that also require that you have a designated workspace at home?
Not real. I mean, so if you can have a designated workspace, that's great, right? I know that's not possible for everybody, but if you do, great. I've seen some amazing people who have transformed their closets into offices. If
Okay.
you like search
'Cause
on
I've
Pinterest
recorded
for
myself
closet
in a
office,
closet before, so I can see that.
and when I heard it, I was like closet office, and then I saw some pictures, and I was like, oh, that's actually not bad. It requires a little bit of space in the closet, but otherwise, I think if you create a work environment wherever that is. So if the kitchen table is your workspace, like maybe it is set up a certain way for the workday, and then put the runner back out, right, and put some candles on the table, and it is no longer the workspace after that.
Mhm.
I will say that and I always think about folks of color. We are the most creative people ever. And it is how we have survived like trauma after trauma and all of these
Mhm.
things. And so I really encourage people to tap into your ability to be creative, to create something out of nothing. And I think that is something that we are all capable of doing.
Mm. Other than that, I would say a lot of our audience members are moms as well. And even myself as a mom, there's I would say there's even more increased mom guilt because your kids are there, they see you working, and then when the school day for some reason ends at 2:30, you're like you still have a few more hours of work left. And so how do you manage the guilt and perhaps manage the expectation of your kids to have all of you during the workday?
Yeah. Yeah. So these are like hard and, near impossible questions, right?
Yeah.
But I will say one to acknowledge that like this is hard, right? So there is no, if I were doing it right, I wouldn't feel this way. That is not true. And I think that that is kind of maybe the mindset shift that needs to
Mhm.
happen. Because what happens if you're operating under the assumption that there's a right way to do it, that every time you don't feel good about it, you're telling yourself you're doing it wrong, right?
Mm.
And you've literally set yourself up to never feel okay with what's happening. And it's all based on a faulty assumption, a faulty logic that you're operating off of. So I really encourage you to shift that to there's probably no way I'm going to not feel guilty about working while my kids want me in the other room. That is not,
Yep.
that's just not happening.
Yep.
And separating feeling from fact and being able to do that, right? So it's about a decision that you're making, not just what's going to make me feel better. It's like, what is the truth? The truth is I need to work. This is a crappy situation that we're in, this pandemic, and I have to do it like this. My best case scenario is to distract the kids with this while I do this, and I have to deal with the discomfort, right? And so not telling yourself that you can't handle discomfort. But I think a lot of us are uncomfortable right now, and that is a reality of the situation that we're in.
Mm. So another dynamic I think that's interesting to talk about is romantic relationships with partners. And we've
Mhm.
heard the divorce statistics coming out of this past year. And already, I would say, Black women who are a little bit more educated, who are a little bit more powerful, I would say, tend to have issues when it comes to relationships with that dynamic. So that probably has been shifted to a different level. So, what advice do you have, if any, for women, Black women, as they're really hyper focused on building businesses and building careers to maintain healthy romantic relationships as well?
Yeah. I will say one. I will say, in addition to the divorce statistics that we're seeing, I will also say that we are seeing couples get stronger together in this environment. And so I don't want to negate that. And I think a lot, and also, I also just want to highlight, I think it's really interesting how most of the Black women probably that are listening to this right now have beat the statistics in terms of what is expected of somebody. Like we're talking about, like I know like this community like that is always like, you were the best at this, you were in the top X% of this, you did all of these things. And then when it comes to relationships, sometimes I think we tend to say like, oh, if 50% of relationships fail, mine's not going to work. And I'm like, you've never been in the bottom 50% before ever in anything. Why is that the assumption here? Right. And so I think to say that we are seeing, I don't know what the statistics are in turn. I don't know if there's any data yet. And like how many relationships are stronger because of this. Right. But anecdotally, we're seeing this. If we're looking at that and we're saying, hey, 20% of relationships actually thrived in this environment, like the thought for our folks should be like, oh, I'm going to be in that 20%. Like, how am I going to get myself in that 20%? And that's the way we think about everything else, right? So we want to stay consistent with our expectations of ourselves. But then just in terms of relationships, I would say making sure that it remains a priority. And that might look a little bit different, but I think that to look at your schedule and say like, where have I blocked out time for my partner? And so one of the things, I started doing in my marriage is, a certain day of the week, like at a certain time, like in the evening, like, okay, Tuesdays from 7 o'clock, nobody gets to work anymore. And we're like doing something together. Right. And so it's just setting up whatever that looks like. And for some people, maybe that's every other week. Maybe it's like once a month, we block off a day. It can look different to fit your life. But even if it's like, on one day a week, we like hide in our room and watch a movie together from the kids, right? They go to bed.
Give them their tablet, we'll watch our movie.
And whatever that looks like, but actually being intentional. And so I always say, planning and like your to-do list is usually big, for professional women. And I always say that list really needs to include like your self-care and your time for your family and your loved ones and everything. So if you look at what you plan to do for the day and you want to ask yourself, like, if I do all of these things today, will I end the day feeling accomplished and whole, right? And usually when I look at anybody's task list before we start this work, it's all work, right? And it's impossible and it's not enough time to do any of it. Well, not most of it. And so what we do is we do the most important things. And then we're like, oh, I should have did more. I'll do more tomorrow. And like you move everything over to the next day, right? And it's kind of like you set yourself up to never feel good about yourself, right? And so I think the way that you shift that is to say that each day you literally we want to chase joy every single day. So you need a moment, whatever that looks like, every single day where you have this rush of endorphins, where you smile really big or laugh really hard at something. And if you're not having that every day, like we're not doing this right. And so we need to adjust what our plan is for the day so it includes that. And I think when you do that and you look at your week, like your relationship should be a part of this. Like, have I planned out a week where I'm going to feel like I prioritized my relationship? And usually the answer is no. And then you go back, replan until you're like, okay, this will work for me. And I'll acknowledge that always usually means you will have to do less of something else.
Yeah, there are only so many hours in the day. But I love that you said you have to chase joy every single day. You have to allot time for that. And if it's not on your to-do list, you have to reprioritize. I love that. That's just going to have to be a marquee quote. But aside from that, now we are dealing with a lot. And I wonder if there are good and bad coping mechanisms or any that you would recommend in order to help us reset. I know earlier you had mentioned meditation. And for some people, therapy is a foreign concept, much less meditation. So what are some examples you can throw out there so people can try until they find something that works for them?
Yeah, so I will say definitely 100%, we need to be doing things intentionally to chase joy. And I will say right now, so what we are all experiencing right now is a traumatic experience. This is living through a trauma, and it's a prolonged trauma, right? So by any definition, any clinical definition of trauma, we're in it, right? So, and it doesn't matter if you don't want to be in it. It doesn't matter if you think you're fine. You're living through a traumatic experience. And so some people come out of that fine, And some people statistically will not be okay. And long term, they will develop, a decline in their mental health, which means like they might end up with depression, like a severe depression, might end up with severe anxiety, might end up with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And these are things that, we may be genetically more predisposed to or not for lots of different reasons, right? Whether we have resources, etc. So that's kind of something that we actually can't control. But what we do know about trauma experiences from just looking at past traumatic experiences, even like from Hurricane Katrina and other things, we know that what buffers the impact. So what gives you a fighting chance is self-care and it's so interesting, but literally scientifically, that is the thing, like your ability to take care of yourself and infuse joy into your life on a daily basis is the thing that will stack the deck in your favor to prevent you from having some of those longer term effects, right? So I think about in this time right now, what I'm telling everybody is that it is not about wanting to feel good. It's not about indulging in yourself. It's not about self-care is trendy. This is about survival and protecting yourself. And so if you want to protect your mind, which we all want to protect our mind, we need to do this out of necessity. So it's like, it's not because and I think a lot of the times we don't want to in the times that we're in. Like it's hard right now. It's kind of depressing to be experiencing all of this and like the monotony of the days. And this is hard. And so the last thing usually you want to do when you're bored and annoyed and sad and upset is to go take a bubble bath. I mean, you might think it, but you're like, I mean, I don't have time for that.
Although you do, because you're bored. So.
Yeah. I just want to lay in my bed and hide from it all. Or it's not, I think a lot of folks are like, I don't feel like doing those things. And really my challenge is like, that doesn't actually matter. Like you need to do them because this is like, think about it as like medicine, as a prescription to protect yourself from like what is ahead. So when I say, and then I'll say that, and then some things that you can do, you want to laugh. So what makes you laugh? So like checking out, like I have my favorite comedians. I frequent their social media pages way more often, watching comedy specials that are coming out, watching Black shows that are joyful. Not, it's probably not the time to be watching all of the stories about Black trauma, like movies and stuff. There are a lot of great shows that just depict like Black culture and life and things that like make you like see yourself reflected in a healthy way, like on media. I think like obviously engaging your senses. So taking baths, listening to music is actually really great. So you can have your go-tos. So I have my days where like my gospel is my thing. And then I have days where I like to do my trap music, whatever it is.
Whatever the mood calls for.
Yes, music is healing. There's actually a lot of research around rhythm and beats being healing, particularly more impactful actually for Black folks based on our history. So also I will say connecting with friends and family. So I know that's also a doozy right now because of the pandemic, but what I see is a lot of folks like kind of pulling away from community in a lot of these times. But what's actually can be really helpful is to intentionally call someone you haven't talked to in a long time. So like an old friend, and just have a good catch-up call. Even if in the moment you don't feel like doing it, like do it anyways, because you know these are the things that are good for your soul, right? And you want to check in with yourself, like, did I feel better after I did that? And it's like, yeah, actually I did. Or and sometimes it does, it's not like, oh, I took a bath and now I'm 100% better, but you actually want to know if like the thing that you did made you feel one level a little bit better. And if it did, that's a good thing. And then we want to keep doing those things. So what we know is that being happy isn't about the sustained period of I'm happy all of the time. It's about having moments of joy. So if it brought you joy for a few moments, that is a positive, and you want to keep doing those. And that actually compounds over time and leads to you like having a more happier life. Sustained joy all day is a little unrealistic in the time that we're in right now. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be chasing the burst. Like you absolutely should be.
So another thing I know about us as Black women is that we're driven, a lot of us are driven to succeed and to see success. And maybe we've traditionally gotten joy from seeing the fruits of our labor and hustling, really. And sometimes the hustle becomes a mask for what is truly going on underneath that we don't want to deal with. And I think this is a prime time for that to start happening again. So how do you know if you are working because there is in fact a goal that you're trying to accomplish versus if you are working because you don't want to deal with whatever else is going on in your life?
Yeah. That's so interesting. I think that it's like there's a competition between success and happiness, right? And it's almost like
Hmm.
um it seems like it gets in the way. Like I'm working, and that makes me happy. And this whole like other part of life joy stuff is just like a nuisance a little bit. Like we can move that over here. I think it really is, about checking in with yourself and getting in touch with knowing what it is that you're feeling. And that is easier said than done. But I do think like if we can get in the habit of saying, where am I today in terms of my well-being? And I'm going to explain that in a second. Then I think that we can then, it's about pinpointing like, okay, what is causing me to like be good or not good, right? And so when I think about what does that mean, I think that probably the most complicated question of 2020 was like, how are you?
How do you think I am?
I don't even know how to answer the question, but not good.
Right? Oh man.
But to be able to put words to it or something, a rating to it is actually really important. And it actually helps us communicate better. Right. And so one of the things that I've been doing is actually helping people with language in both like their personal life and even in a corporate space. Like, so how do you talk to your manager about not doing well? And I like to use a simple 1 to 10 rating scale. And I'll just say briefly, so like a 10. So you're thinking about wellness as your overall well-being, as in how protected do you feel against stressors in your life? So as a Black person, we need a certain level of protection, like a force surrounding us to be able to deal with just the daily things that come at you every day, right? Like your kid's gonna act up, your partner's gonna act up, your person at work that you can't stand gonna act up. Like all of these things are gonna happen. It might be raining, like, but you need a certain level of umph to be able to interact with the day, right? And so and I think about it as this ball of energy that you carry inside of you. And so when that ball is at a 10 and it is glowing, bright, and shining, you are your best self. So you can conquer the world, your business is on fire, you're thinking of new ideas, you're, supporting the movement, you're doing everything and you're using your gifts. You have full access to your gifts and talents, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's great. When you're at a 7, that's like, I mean, I'm okay, but I probably, I'm not gonna cook dinner tonight, but like I will order from DoorDash. you know,
Mhm. Yep, been
I
there.
will. I'm gonna have a glass of wine, and then I'll be ready for the next day. Like you can do something and recover. You all right? Out of 5, I like to call 5 my everybody got one more.
Oh yes. Sometimes I just at that one more, I just go into my room and close the door
Yeah.
because no, you're not even gonna get a chance to do the one
Right?
more.
It's like, you know what? I'm here, but seriously, one more.
Mhm.
One more somebody say
Yep.
something. It's over. And then at a 3, that is actually when you're experiencing pain. So this is when you
Mm.
are being like you literally are having a hard time interacting. You might be crying, very angry, whatever emotion that comes up, but you're feeling it very intensely. You're probably having a hard time getting out of bed. You might have called out of work, might not have, because you know how folks do be going anyway.
Mhm.
But that is like a level of pain and distress. And then all the way down to a 1 is like questioning the will to live, right? Like
Mm.
none of this matters. Like I can't get up in the morning. I have nothing. If I take one step outside, I will be scorched and burned by the sun, right?
Mm.
And so when I ask folks, like, where are you? Like, how do you feel? And I think one good thing is to check in with yourself and say, where are you on a 1 to 10, right? And if you're and like that answer helps you figure out how to interact with your day, right? And
Mm.
so if you're at a 5, like what does that mean, right? Like knowing, being intentionally saying, I'm at a 5. Is that the day you should go into the contentious meeting at work and get into a debate with somebody about something, right? And it's not about them, it's about you have to protect yourself. So out of like 100% top priority should be protecting your mental health and your well-being. And when you know where you are, like you can't control what the environment will do to you, right? But you can be intentional about how you intentionally use your energy and what situations you put yourself in so that you can preserve yourself. And then I say, anytime you're below a 7, your goal is to do things that bring you moments of joy to help you boost yourself back up. Right? That's kind of how I think about it. Like it's like, today's a 5. Like I got to be doing some stuff today, right? Like I need to be doing my happy things. And I think you making long lists, like what are the things that make me happy, right? And just start doing them and still until you start feeling better, right? And I say that if you spend a 2-week span of time and actually doing things. So like some people don't actually do anything and they just sit in pain for that time, right?
Yeah.
But if you are actually trying and you have no improvement in 2 weeks, that's when you need to connect with the therapist. And that is a sign that like, okay, like something else, like this is when you need some support.
Okay. I love that you've given us a tool and a mechanism that we can use to check in with ourselves to see, why am I doing X? Am I driving myself to work so hard because I really don't have any other tools to cope? And I think you've given us a whole framework to use there, because these are times where we actually need them. So Dr. Tai, you've given us so much to think about today. And I know this is an episode people are going to listen to over and over again. But if anyone out there feels like I could really use some prolonged nearness to Dr. Tai because I need to see her every week, how can we make that happen? Where can we find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So online at theblackgirldoctor.com. So the website, we have a team of Black women psychologists. I work in the practice as well as, running the business to offer therapy. We're actually getting ready to launch a group wellness coaching program. So that might be something folks are interested in that want to actually have accountability for finding joy every day and having strategies and some support around that. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at the Black Girl Doctor. So very simple. And folks could also feel free to DM me or shoot me an email.
If you enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Tai and feel inspired to launch a business of your own, I want you to consider joining our Boss Off Script membership community. Within our Boss Off Script community, you will not only receive live coaching and resources, but also get to build your business within a community of like-minded founders. For more information and to join us today, go to sewaajpele.com/community. If you would like to listen to the audio version of this podcast and go back and binge listen from the beginning, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere podcasts are available. On your way out, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next conversation with a female founder who's created their own unique blueprint for business success. Okay, we'll see you on the next one.